Fuel Standard is Canada's latest climate change policy. Basically, it requires that all fuel produced in Canada produce less carbon. So other jurisdictions such as BC and California have had similar policies in place for nearly a decade for transportation fuels. But Canada's Clean Fuel Standard is going to be the first policy of its kind to extend outside of transportation to include building and industry fuels as well. So whether these other sectors will experience success will completely depend on how the Clean Fuel Standard is implemented. So the carbon tax and the Clean Fuel Standard both set out to achieve the same goal, which is to reduce emissions, yet they do so in different and complementary ways. So the carbon tax is intended to reduce the amount of fuel we consume by making it more expensive, and the Clean Fuel Standard aims to make that fuel less carbon intensive. And the way that costs are applied under each policy is different as well. So under the carbon tax, we have the costs directly applied to consumers, so we pay those costs directly at the pump. Whereas under the Clean Fuel Standard, the costs are applied to producers. But this doesn't necessarily mean that those costs won't trickle down to consumers as well. So everyone wants to know, how much is the Clean Fuel Standard going to cost me? And this is a much more difficult question to answer than under the carbon tax, where the costs are predetermined. So whether the costs handed down to you and me are high or low depends how or if fuel suppliers can reduce the carbon intensity of their fuel. So for example, these costs might be high if fuel suppliers can only reduce the carbon intensity of their fuel through expensive means, such as purchasing $200 credits. But on the other hand, the costs handed down to us might be low if fuel suppliers can do this in a way that saves the money in the long run, for example, making their processes more efficient. So there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Clean Fuel Standard and its impacts for Canadians, businesses, and industry, and that's something we're going to be staying on top of at the Canada West Foundation.